Fold 7 was supposed to be a controlled experiment, safe. No one among us believed that we would change history. That is perhaps the most terrifying part of everything that happened. We did not want to open a door to the past. We did not want to contact another civilization. And we certainly did not want to touch the very structure of time. We only wanted to shorten the distance between 2 points. The fold drive program was born from a simple idea. If space can be folded, distance ceases to be an obstacle. That was the version presented to the public. The truth was different. 3 kilometers beneath the Arctic ice in the Helios facility, all of us knew what we were actually doing. We were not only folding space, we were disrupting order, cause, memory, reality itself. Helios was built as a fusion of laboratory and bunker. The vast central hall rose nearly 10 meters high. On the upper platform were gravitational analyzers, resonance sensors, and monitoring consoles for the fold core. Below them stood rows of black cabinets behind thick glass. Thousands of small lights pulsed inside the supercomputers. It looked as if the machine was breathing. On the opposite side of the hall stood the ring, officially a stabilization device for localized space-time curvature, unofficially a portal, a massive metal structure embedded in a reinforced wall. Cables descended from the ceiling like veins, cameras, microphones, emergency shutdown systems. Everything was aimed at the center of the ring, as if the entire facility existed only for that one moment. That night, the Fold 7 experiment was supposed to last only 28 seconds. The first 8 seconds were perfect. The core reached its design density. The ring maintained a stable field shape. Gravitational deviations remained within allowed limits. A blue line appeared on the main monitor, indicating that space was bending but not breaking. I remember feeling something I had not felt for a long time: pride. Not because of myself, not because of the team, not even because of humanity, but because something that had belonged to mathematics for centuries was breathing in front of us for the first time. Then the instruments began to lag, first by a fraction of a second, then by a full second. One of the technicians said we had a synchronization problem. He did not sound frightened, not yet. At the 18th second, a sphere appeared inside the ring. Not a hole, not an opening, not a view of the other side. A sphere. Bluish, luminous, semi-transparent, as if a piece of a storm had been placed in the center of the room. It expanded slowly, almost elegantly. The light was uneven, in some places soft and calm, in others pulsing as if it had a heartbeat. Electric branches erupted from the sphere and touched the surrounding metal surfaces. They did not behave like normal arcs of electricity. They moved with intention, as if searching for a path. One of the senior scientists, Dr. Hale, stepped too close. He wore protective goggles. I remember the blue light fracturing across the glass. He said only, "I hear something." In the control gallery, we all fell silent. At first, we thought he meant vibration. The ring emitted a deep hum, almost below the threshold of hearing. The floor trembled. Server glass vibrated slightly, but then we heard it too. Voices, not interference, not radio noise. Voices. One spoke English, but with an accent I could not place anywhere on Earth. Another spoke something resembling German, but it was not German. A third was crying. Then a child's voice broke through the intercom. "Do not open it a second time." No one knew where it came from. The communication system was sealed. There was no external signal, no open frequency, no link to the surface. At the 23rd second, Dr. Hale vanished, not by explosion, not by a flash of light. He was simply no longer there, as if space had never contained his body. One camera still recorded him, another did not. A third showed only an empty space. Our reality could no longer agree with itself. I ordered the shutdown. I do not know why I was the one who did it. I was not the project leader. I did not have the highest authority. But I clearly remember pressing the red manual shutdown button. Later, they would say that button never existed, that there was no manual override in Helios, that I probably invented it under stress. But I remember the cold metal edge under my fingers. I remember the resistance of the spring. I remember the sound of the alarm that followed. The lights went out for 4 seconds. 4 seconds, long enough for everything to change. When auxiliary systems returned, the ring was dead. The sphere was gone. Dr. Hale stood beside the portal as if he had never moved, but he did not recognize us. He asked where he was. He asked what year it was. Then he looked at his hands and began to scream, not from pain, from memory. Later I realized he was the first of us to begin to be erased, but not the last. An alarm call came from Hangar 3. Hangar 3 was not part of the experiment. It was nearly 500 meters away behind 2 armored corridors and a service chamber. It was used for equipment storage and transport vehicles. When we arrived, the doors were open from the inside. In the center of the hangar stood an aircraft, an old fuselage, a propeller engine, a narrow cockpit, wings like something from a museum of World War II. But nothing about it was old. The metal showed no signs of corrosion. The surface was not aluminum, nor any known alloy. Rivets were perfectly aligned, but they were not rivets. They resembled biological joints more than mechanical parts. The cockpit instruments were impossible. Analog gauges were arranged like aircraft from the 1940s, but behind the glass the markings moved in ways that were not mechanical, as if symbols reacted to the pilot, not the engine. Next to the aircraft stood a man in a flight suit. He was calm, too calm, as if someone who had already woken up in the wrong world. He said his name was Elias Ward. Military police immediately found a record of Elias Ward, British pilot, missing in 1944 during a mission over Europe, never recovered. The problem was that the man in front of us did not look like someone who had disappeared more than a century ago, and an even bigger problem was that his aircraft did not belong to 1944, nor to our time. During the first interrogation, Major Calder asked him where he came from. Elias answered, "From the line that survived the second crossing." Calder asked him to repeat it. Elias looked at him for several seconds, as if deciding how much truth was safe. "You don't call it that yet," he said. That was the first sentence that made my blood turn cold. Not because of what he said, but because he sounded like a man who was not surprised. Following days, everything began to collapse more quietly than expected. There was no explosion, no invasion, no black holes in the sky. It was worse. We began to forget. At first, small things, names of colleagues, room numbers, access codes, then more important things. Which team built Fold 6? Why Fold 5 was shut down? Whether Fold 4 ever existed? Every morning I wrote notes to myself, on paper, not digital. Digital data changed. Sometimes it vanished, sometimes it altered. Sometimes records appeared that I had never written, but carried my handwriting, my phrasing, my style, if the document was scanned. One morning I found a sentence on my desk: "If you forget your name, do not read further." It was written in my handwriting. I do not remember writing it. Major Calder had a different problem. His data did not disappear. He disappeared from the data. First, he could not access the security archive. The system rejected his credentials. Then he was denied entry to command sectors. Not because of insufficient clearance, but because his clearance did not exist. When he called Central Command, they said no such military oversight unit existed in Helios. When he showed documents, they were blank. When he described protocols, people laughed, not mockingly, but as if he had confused reality with an old movie. One officer told him, "Major, those are Cold War procedures. They haven't been used for decades." Calder realized he was not losing access. He was losing the history that defined him. Elias Ward watched everything from isolation. He did not try to escape. He did not try to resist. When asked why he stayed silent, he said, "Because every answer accelerates collapse." Dr. Voss asked what was collapsing. Elias looked through the glass. "You," he said. The unidentified people. They arrived without warning. 4 individuals, 3 men and 1 woman. They moved calmly as if they had already seen every possible outcome. Elias recognized them immediately. He stood up for the first time since he arrived. The woman said his name. "Ward," he replied. "Adina." Then we heard the rest. Ra, Thorm, Zeus. The architect Zeus said, "We do not come from stars. We come from your tomorrow." Zeus paused before speaking again. He did not look like a god. He looked like a man tired of explaining the same truth to civilizations that refused to understand it. "There is no alien empire," he said. "There is only you. But not one you. Many. Fragments. Branches of the same species, scattered across different outcomes. Some evolved far ahead of us. Some abandoned technology. Some collapsed before reaching stability. Some tried to master fold physics and failed. And some, like Elias Ward's line, survived what they called the crossing." Adina spoke more quietly. "The crossing is not progress. It is the moment a civilization realizes it is no longer isolated from the consequences of its own knowledge. That was the first time I understood something was wrong with them too. Not evil, not benevolent, but uncertain. The choice Zeus said there were only two outcomes: reset or crossing. Reset meant rolling civilization back before the fold threshold, erasing knowledge, rewriting history so the experiment never reached critical point. Billions would continue to live, but not exactly these billions, not this version of history, not us. Crossing meant the opposite, accepting the truth, opening contact with other human branches, accelerating evolution, risking collapse of all stable timelines. Major Calder asked the question none of us wanted to speak. "Who gave you the right to decide?" Thorm answered immediately. "You did." In the following days, documentation began to fracture, reports split into multiple versions, sometimes contradictory, sometimes mutually exclusive. In one file, Dr. Hale died before the experiment. In another, he never existed. In another, I was not a scientist at all. I was a consultant, or nothing. That version frightened me most, because for a moment I almost believed it was true. We began recording ourselves, every hour. "I am Dr. Samuel Rainey. I was born on October 14th. I lead theoretical fold drive research. My mother's name was Elena. She had a scar on her left hand. She did not like cold weather. She did not like cold weather. She did not like..." On one recording, I go silent for 20 seconds. Then I ask, "Who is Elena?" I have never been able to listen to that recording fully. The deeper truth archaeological level data recovered from Helios suggested something worse. Not that fold created anomalies, but that anomalies were already part of the structure. Fold 7 did not open a path. It triggered a pressure between possible presents. Each correction created a new branch. Each branch altered memory, identity, and history. Reality was not diverging cleanly. It was tearing. Adina finally admitted it. "This is not an anomaly. This is a loop." The word stayed in the air longer than it should have. A loop is not an error, not a malfunction, not a side effect. A loop is a structure that sustains itself by ensuring its own origin. We did not find fold. Fold always leads back to us. We did not summon the architects. Their arrival is part of the structure. Zeus activated the archive, not digital, not holographic, not mechanical. A black mineral slab absorbed all light around it. He placed his hand on it. The room responded, not visually, physically. The air vibrated, the floor resonated. Reality itself began to overlap. Helios did not move, but we did, or rather, versions of us did. Multiple iterations of the same facility overlapped in the same space. Different outcomes of the same event collapsed into a single moment. We saw ourselves standing in different roles, different histories, different identities. Scientist, officer, pilot, observer, the architects, all present, all repeated. All identical in pattern, not in form. Zeus finally looked exhausted, not physically, existentially, as if he had just remembered every version of himself at once. "This is not a chain of events," he said. "This is a loop that produces its own conditions." Adina added quietly, "We are inside it." We were not outside observers, not operators, not authors of the event. We were part of the recurrence. Every attempt to fix it only ensured it would happen again. I do not know if this record will survive. I do not know if I will remember writing it. I do not know if Calder will exist in the next iteration. I do not know if Elias Ward will land again. I do not know if the architects will return believing they can still decide. But if this exists in any form, then one thing must remain clear. Fold 7 was not the beginning, and it will not be the end. The crossing did not start when we bent space. It started when the first human looked at the sky and assumed it was separate from him, or when the first architect tried to intervene, or when the universe first learned it could observe itself through us. I do not know. That is the hardest part. I do not know. Final transmission. Last night I heard voices again on a dead frequency. This time they were not crying, not warning, not calling for help. They were repeating one sentence, slowly, patiently, as if they had been saying it for thousands of years. The crossing has already begun. And beneath it, barely audible, I heard my own voice. From another version of this same night, do not open it a second time.